Brian, you have the floor.
Thanks very much, Jeff. And we'll actually start by just building off of what you did right there. If you would like to, out there, learners, where it says to in that chat box, you'll see it says all panelists next to that. You can click that all panelists and actually go ahead and switch it to all panelists and attendees if you would like. And what that will let you do is that'll let everybody in the webinar see anything that you share, whether it be a question or a comment. That is how we'll take questions throughout the course of our webinar here today, and it's often helpful for people to see what others are asking so we can all learn from each other, and also you're welcome to share ideas throughout the webinar. So if you want to, and you don't have to, but if you would like to, go ahead and switch that to all panelists and attendees right now, and then go ahead and say hello to your colleagues here in the webinar with you. Got a shy group here today. I haven't seen any come in yet. Once again, there we go. All right, thanks to Kelly for starting us off, quickly followed by many others. I am joined by one of my colleagues here today, Courtney Sutton, who is our competition guru, competition maven, competition master, what have you, here. And say hello.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, thanks for joining us, Courtney. Like I said, the chat box is how we will take questions here today. Just know that there might be some moments where we wait until the right moment to pick up a question after we get through some material. And also there might be some particularly complicated questions or questions that are really specific to your particular situation or your particular opportunity. And when that's the case, we'll refer you to an email box that I will share a little bit later on. Before we go too much farther, we want to just get a sense of who is in the room here today. Go ahead and let us know if your organization has received a federal grant before. It is totally okay if you have not. I actually think, and many of you will have heard me say this already, that the Corporation for National Community Service is a great place for an organization to start its partnership with a federal entity. But it's good to know who has that experience. It'll come up in a couple of moments, and we can draw on some of that knowledge if it's in the room. Right, let's go ahead and share those results. Looks like most people have, but not everybody. And again, that is totally okay. You are in the right place if you have not. Got a couple more questions just to get a sense of the room. Okay, let's see how well you all know Senior Corps. Are you brand new to all of this? Are you a current grantee, or are you familiar with our work but maybe not a grantee? Give people a minute to answer that. Okay, let's share the results that we've got here. A pretty good distribution. For those of you who are in the Senior Corps community, you are welcome here. Thank you for all that you have done to make this such a vibrant community over the years. For those of you who are a little bit newer to this, it's one of my favorite times of year when I get to share our work, the work of this community, with those who might be new to national service and might be new to Senior Corps. You're in the right place. In this program, we're going to focus specifically on one of our programs, the Senior Companion Program, and that's the program, or one of the two programs, I should say, that's available for competition right now. But just know that I'll share some ways that you can learn more about the work that we do if you want to go beyond that. All right, we've got one final question here. Let us know if you have attended any of our previous webinars about this competition. There have been two of those, one yesterday and one the day before that. So let us know if you've attended either of those. All right, looks like we've still got a couple answers coming in. I'm going to wait just one more tick. Okay, and let's share the results there. Again, a pretty even distribution. All right, so again, I will show you guys in actually just a minute where you can get some information that goes beyond the scope of today's webinar if this is your first entry into the process. This is one of a series of 4 trainings. Actually, why don't we just go ahead and go to that right now. This is one of a series of 4 on different right down here, right? We're focusing in on the Senior Companion Program here today. But if you want more high-level information about the competition as a whole, we're going to have a recording of this first session up by next week. So you can check out this website here, the competition homepage, the same website that you used to register for this webinar, to get the recording of actual webinars, and that'll be up next week. There'll be a recording of this webinar too. For those of you who have attended some of our earlier webinars, know first of all that there's going to be a little bit of repetition. As you can see, we've got plenty of people coming in for the first time now, and we want to make sure everybody is working with an equal footing. So we're going to cover the same basics. So we'll cover that same sort of 101 introduction to this process, although we won't go into as much depth as we did up here. For those of you who attended yesterday's webinar about the foster grandparent program, as you may have already be thinking, there's actually a lot of two programs, so when that's the case, you'll find that there's some overlap there as well, of how that might come to pass. For example, is both programs engage stipended volunteers and both have the same income threshold. So wherever the information is the same, you will see the same information, of course. Okay. So what are we going to focus on in this webinar? Well, we are going to recap some competition basics, as I already said. We're also going to help you try to understand if the Senior Companion Program is right for you. We want you to be able to leave this webinar confident in your decision to apply. And hint, hint, I hope I'm not giving away the farm here. We think it's a really good program and we hope you apply. But we also want you to be able to develop a realistic, complete application. So we're going to go through some of the ins and outs of the program so you understand how it works a little bit, so that way your application is ready to be implemented if it is chosen from the applications that we receive. Oh, apologies. One more note before we dive into the actual content. I mentioned this mailbox. It's probably good to zero in on it right now, and I'm actually also going to type it into the chat box just to make sure that we all have it. If there are any questions that we don't get to today or that are very specific to your situation or your organization, that is the mailbox for you. Please don't hesitate to submit any questions you might have there. We've got a great team led by Courtney herself, who is in charge of answering those questions. We'll make sure that we refer to that resource a few different times throughout this webinar. Okay, with all that out of the way, Courtney, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Brian. So competition for foster grandparent and senior companion program is open right now, which means that you are able to submit an application anytime between now until our application deadline, which is 5 p.m. on December 6th. This competition is a replacement competition, and so we have some limited geographic areas that are open for funding, and that information about exactly where those locations are, we will talk about a little bit more later. And it was also available on the website that Brian pointed out and is linked on the bottom of the screen there. Also, for any information, any review of any of the information we talk about in terms of competition today, you can check out the website or email us at the 2020 FGP SCP email account where we can answer questions.
Hey, Courtney, sorry to interrupt your flow here, but I just saw a question come in. This one was sent just to the panelists from Alba, and I think it's a pretty important one, so I think it might be worth pausing here. The question is the application available now?
Yes, you can go on to, you can sign in if you have an eGrants account, which is our electronic grants management system, and start your application if you are ready to take that step. Great.
Okay, I want to make sure we didn't lose that. Go ahead.
Yep, and, okay. So this slide is just a snapshot of the opportunities we have available throughout the country. For those of you who can see it, some of the states are listed in blue. Those are going to be for our foster grandparent programs. The orange or red colored states are the ones that have senior companion programs available. And then the green states have opportunities for both programs. Our presentation today is going to focus mainly on those orange and green opportunities that are available. And this is a snapshot of our Appendix A, which is the listing that is on our competition website. From left to right, it shows the state, the amount of federal funding from CNCS that is available for the program, our projected start date of each grant based on our competition timeline, the minimum level of volunteer service years that is required based on the funding level, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and then the areas affected in terms of the localities within the states that are open for funding.
Sorry about that. I had a little issue with my mute button. Thanks very much, Courtney. As Courtney mentioned, we are going to come back to this volunteer service year column, so if that's a new term for you, you want to know more about that, just hang on to those questions. We will pick them up in just a minute. Okay, but with that, we will dive in to the real meat of our topic here today, the Senior Companion Program. That's what we're focusing on. That's what we're focusing on, the Senior Companion Program. Actually, before I go on to that, I do want to take one question here because I think it's useful to point out. P. Tekamin says, your map indicates the upper UP as a potential SCP site in county in Michigan, which is the lower part of the state, and there's a reason why I want this. The way this map works is it's just state by state. So really it's just Michigan is what we're trying to show there. I apologize if that's not clear. What we're trying to show is Michigan, but what is worth highlighting is that in these different states, there are specific areas that are available. In other words, the way this competition works is typically, there are occasional exceptions to this, but as a general rule, you're not going to be applying for all of Michigan, right? You're going to be applying for one particular area, and I don't believe that's Wayne County, but I'm just filling that in as an example. So, again, you're not going to see Pennsylvania, you're going to see a particular portion of Pennsylvania, and those are going to see in Appendix A. I'm going to pull back up in just a second here. All right, so that's what you're going to see here, those portions. So the map is showing you state by state, just to kind of give you a quick reference. Hey, is this state available? What you're going to need to do is go to Appendix A for the SCP program in particular, in this context, to find the specific areas that are available. Clarification just to make right now. Now, let's dive into the meat of the Senior Companion Program. We're going to talk about these 4 topics over the course of the webinar: volunteers, volunteer stations, volunteer assignment, and performance measures. But before we do that, we do want to highlight that there are lots and lots of places where you can get more information. I am not going to be able to tell you everything you need to know about the Senior Companion Program, 5 minutes or so that we have left, nor will Courtney, nor will anyone else, to be frank, right? It's going to take more than just sitting down for an hour, It's going to take some digging into some additional information. So here's some sources of information, and we'll actually use a couple of these, and I'll show you how to use a couple of these as we go throughout our content here today. First, we've got a series of impact videos, which I think are really fantastic because they show you what the programs actually look like, right? It's an on-the-ground perspective of how these programs work. Second, we've got our Senior Corps Stories, which is a series of vignettes about actual Senior Corps volunteer experiences. One thing that we'll emphasize again and again throughout the course of today is how these programs are meant to have a dual impact, both on their community and on volunteers, and I think those stories capture that really well. We'll also talk about how to find information about what national service activities are going on in your state. These are activities that are not just under the banner of the Senior Companion Program, not just under the banner of the Senior Corps Program, but under the banner of the Corporation for National and Community Service. That's the federal agency that Courtney and I are a part of, and that sponsors all of these activities, as well as several more. And if you haven't heard of that, or if you're not familiar with our work, I really encourage you to follow this link and to go and see right now. In addition, if you're here to learn about the Senior Companion Program, but you don't see an opportunity in your area in Appendix A, this is another fantastic resource because you can go and see if there's already perhaps a program near you. And they're often looking for partners. As we'll talk about, partnership is really a cornerstone element of the Senior Companion Program. So if you want to learn more, but you're not located in one of these areas that are up for competition right now, please use that link and see what is going on in your area, because there might be opportunities for you to partner up with somebody who's already got a Senior Companion grant. The final two resources I'm not going to talk about very much right now because those are the ones that I will show you later. Essentially, they're where you can go to learn about the day-to-day management of grants. They're where you can go to learn of managing these grants. And like I said, we'll use those as we go. I do see we got another question about the service areas available, and I'm going to have to direct you at this point to Appendix A on the competition website. That's where you're going to find the service areas that are available. So please go to Appendix A, and what you'll see listed there are the service areas available for competition right now. Final resource, we've already mentioned it a bunch. I just mentioned again. This is the exact service areas that are available right now. So please go there, and actually in a little bit, I will be able to paste that in the chat box. You guys have an even quicker way to get there to see what we're talking about. And we'll go and we'll browse there in a little bit too. But first, let's check out a little video. I like this perspective on the Senior Companion Program. Hang on, and you'll see some changes on your screen while I pull this up.
She is more than just someone I do errands with.
He's more than just a companion. He's a friend.
She's more than someone who needs reminders.
She's more than a client. She's my friend, and I enjoy being with her.
She is definitely more than someone that just drives me to my appointments.
She's a friend. I learn a lot from her. She's just a great companion to be with.
She's like a daughter. She's like family to me. She's someone I love to laugh with.
I'll just take him out for a drive in the country and be in a natural setting.
She's the reason to get out of bed and get moving.
When we're out and about and doing things together, it's just something I really look forward to.
I take her to doctor appointments, but we do so much more.
Without her as my senior companion, I wouldn't be able to get out of my house.
You can help make independence a reality. Join Senior Corps Senior Companions at seniorcorps.gov.
Apologies for that. Hang on one second while I pull our presentation back up.
When my wife passed away, I wanted to give back, so that's how I got involved with the Senior Companion Program. One of my clients, Leland, I take him to his doctor's appointments. We go.
Sorry, everybody, I have a runaway video here. It should be out of this in just a second. Okay, I believe we are back in the presentation. Sorry about that. That's a little preview of a video we're going to close with at the end, actually, I think. But if you're not seeing the slides, please let me know in the chat. But I think we are back in business. I did, by the way, or I will right now, rather, paste in a URL to the competition homepage. Note that there's actually a shorter URL that we have shared with you. That works too. This was just a quick one to copy and paste for me, where you can go and find, again, that Appendix A, where we have the important information about the service areas that are available to you. So let's talk about the Senior Companion Program. I really like that video because I think it does a good job of showing the dual purpose of the Senior Companion Program. What we've got here on the screen right now, yes, it's a lot of text, but I think it's important because this comes directly from the regulations that establish this program, right? So this is written into law, essentially, as the purpose of the Senior Companion Program. It is to provide grants to qualified agencies and organizations. Hopefully some of you will fall into that category, for the dual purpose of engaging persons 55 and older, particularly those with limited incomes, in volunteer service to meet critical community needs, and to provide a high-quality experience that will enrich the lives of volunteers. Program funds are used to support senior companions in providing supportive individualized services to help older adults with their dignity and independence. So that's the purpose of the program right there. There's a few different things that we're going to pull out of that and talk about. The first, I've already hinted at it, is that dual purpose of engaging individuals 55 and older in service to their communities, and then also providing a high-quality experience to those volunteers themselves. The second is that specific purpose on focusing on volunteers with limited incomes, and we'll talk about how that plays out. And then finally, down at the bottom, so providing supportive individualized services to help older adults with special needs maintain their dignity and independence. Those four principles kind of combine to create the Senior Companion as we know it. Senior Companion program, sorry, I should say, as we know it. Let's start by thinking about our volunteers a little bit. As we just saw, volunteers in this program, it does have the specific focus of trying to provide opportunities to serve for volunteers who are of limited income. Note that those aren't the only people who can volunteer as a Senior Companion volunteer. Actually, anyone over the age of 55 may serve as a Senior Companion volunteer. Anyone over the age of 55 may serve as a Senior Companion volunteer. However, for those who are under 200% of the poverty level in their specific state, they're eligible to receive a small stipend for their service to help offset the cost of service. That stipend right now is set at $2.65 an hour. So the idea is we've got lots of research, and I'll talk about this more too, that shows that volunteerism is beneficial to older adults. Well, part of this program's explicit purpose is to make that opportunity accessible to volunteers who have limited income. And this stipend helps do that. There are other potential cost reimbursements that Senior Companion volunteers can receive as well, including supplemental insurance, meals, transportation, recognition, physicals, and other costs. Many of you probably have some questions like, well, what counts as income for this? And how do I go about completing this check? Well, we've got resources that can help you with that. We're not going to be able to answer all of those questions here for you. How to use some of these resources to answer that question. And the two things that we'll use are those two resources I kind of cruised past when we were looking at our resource list earlier today. The Code of Federal Regulations and our Operations Handbook. So let's take them one at a time, and then I'll actually navigate to them and show you how they work. ecfr.gov. CFR there stands for Code of Federal Regulations. That is kind of the official rule book for the federal government. Those of you who have had other federal grants will probably recognize that. The Code of Federal Regulations, often abbreviated CFR, and we encourage you all to use the eCFR. This is the official rule book, again, for the whole federal government, and it's got a chapter called Title 45, Part 2551, just about this program. In addition, for our grantees who already exist, or grantees who have grants right now, to help them sort through some of these day-to-day questions. So let's go see how we can use those. And the question we'll have is, how do I know what counts as income? How do I know what counts as income for the purposes of the Senior Companion program? Okay, and we're going to start here. And I just told you guys the specific chapter of the Code of Federal Regulations. We'll answer this question two ways, and the first way we're going to do it is through the Code of Federal Regulations. There's lots of ways you can get of that. I tend to prefer just searching in a search engine for 551. Now, lots of results are going to come up, but what we're looking for here is the eCFR, because that's the official source. That ecfr.gov lets you know that that's the official source. So let me click on that. As you can see here, we've got all of our regulations. They are generally phrased in the form of a question and answer. And my specific question was, what counts as income? And if I scroll down here, I can see that they've got that actual question. Now, maybe I'm having trouble scrolling down, so one little hint in case you don't know this is if you hit Control-F in just about any web browser, it'll do a keyword search for you. And once again, that's Control-F in just about any browser. That'll do a keyword search for you. And then I can click on this to see what is considered income. And I've got my information right here about what is considered companion program. Now, that's one specific question. We're not going to go through some nuance there, but the key point that I want to illustrate is how you all can use this to find out your own answers to questions you have as you go through this process and consider whether or not this program is right for you. The other thing that you can do is you can use some of the resources that we provide to our grantees right now. This is the website that we call Manage Senior Corps Grants. It was on that list of resources that we saw earlier, and I just pasted that URL into the chat box too. And what are these program handbooks and supplements. There is a program, including the Senior Companion Program, but often where you'll be able to get the most helpful information is by clicking on this, because it takes you to a whole list of all of the handbooks and also all of the appendices that we have. And those are very often going to be templates and similar kinds of tools. But just to show you how the handbooks are organized, I'm going to visit the Senior Companion Handbook. And go to the table of contents. And you can see we've got volunteer assignments. Oh, sorry, I wanted to go one farther down. There you go, SCP volunteers, eligibility to be enrolled, and more information about the enrollment. So those are two ways you can find some more specific tactical information deeper than what we're able to provide here today. All right. Last note about volunteers, I mentioned this before. Why does this program have that dual purpose? Why do we think it's important to offer this opportunity to individuals with limited incomes? Part of the reason is because we know volunteering helps older Americans stay healthier. We've actually done our own study here at the Corporation for National Community Service pretty recently. Results were just released last year that compares based on stayed in the program for 2 years with people who left the program. And we found that those who stayed in the program were less socially isolated, had better health, and were less depressed. And that contributes to a body of knowledge that really indicates that volunteering is a great way for older Americans to stay connected, and that has real, tangible, concrete benefits for them. So that's why we think that dual purpose is so important. But part of that dual purpose, of course, is also getting out in the community and working with people who need some support to live independently. Most senior companion programs do that through a network of what we call stations. If you go look at that Code of Federal Regulations, you will find a, you will find a technical definition of a station. I like to simplify it as where a volunteer serves, right? Where a volunteer serves. Stations are very often organizations that will be partners, providing assignments, selecting beneficiaries, working with a grantee on an assignment plan, providing any necessary orientation and training for that assignment, and providing some supervision and reporting back, also making sure volunteers are safe and secure. And common examples of stations in the Senior Companion Program include aging organizations, faith-based organizations, basically any organization that has access to a client population that needs this kind of support, to remain independent and live in their homes, because that's what the Senior Companion Program is all about. Very often, as I said, those are external organizations to a grantee. Those are organizations that are usually bound by a memorandum of understanding. But note that they don't actually have to be. A sponsor or a grantee, an organization that gets a Senior Companion grant, can actually serve as a station itself. Again, you can find more information in those operational resources that we already highlighted. What will volunteers actually do? Well, we can see the criteria here about what is an appropriate Senior Companion assignment. And you can see the format up at the top of the screen here, 2551.71, that tells you that this comes from the Code of Federal Regulations. So again, if there's this much text on screen, it's probably important. I'm going to read it briefly. Senior provide for Senior Companions to give direct services to one or more eligible adults that result in person-to-person supportive relationships with each client, support the achievement and maintenance of the highest level of independent living for their clients, are meaningful to the Senior Companion, and are supported by appropriate orientation, training, and supervision. Senior Companions shall not provide services such as those performed by medical personnel, services to large numbers of clients, custodial services, administrative support services, or other services that would detract from their assignment. The focus is on this person-to-person supportive. We're looking at one-on-one or one-on-two or three. It really relationships. Most often this actually occurs in the context of homes, although you can imagine some other potential contexts. But it's really all about that person-to-person supportive relationship. So with that in mind, let's see if we can just apply that a little bit and I'm going to see if we can identify what is an appropriate senior companion activity versus an inappropriate senior companion activity. We've got two scenarios on the screen right now, and our job is going to be to determine what is appropriate. I'll start with Anna. Anna is a senior companion volunteer who visits the homes of 2 seniors each week. While there, she helps them with daily chores. She's been trained by the manager to bring some new information to them each time she comes. Apologies that something is cut off there right now. I believe it says right now she's offering information on abuse prevention, or on fraud prevention. Sorry, on fraud prevention. I think we've got enough information there to apply that. Let's look at the second scenario. Alexi is a senior companion volunteer who regularly visits a local assisted living facility. He will spend some brief time chatting with anyone who is up for it during the hours he is there. He occasionally helps staff with activities as well. Which of those is an appropriate senior companion activity? Okay, it looks like we've gotten a pretty good share of it. Let me go ahead and I'm going to share our results here. Looks like in general, we're on top of it. Anna's is the example of the appropriate activity. Note the one-on-one relationship, right? So she's building deep relationships with people. Alexi might not get a chance to do that, just kind of floating and chatting with whoever's around, right? You've got to have a specific client specific. Note also the focus on independence. Anna is working in independent. Alexi is in that kind of facility scenario, right? And we just saw in the regulations, actually I'm going to go back so we can see the text exactly. Right? Large numbers of clients is exact senior companions are not supposed to be serving, okay? That's with that facility setting. So most of us got that, so I think we're in a pretty good shape in terms of a senior companion activity. All right, we've gone through a lot of information so far. The next topic is performance measurement. That'll take a little bit of time. That's where we're going to dive into that VSY question. So we're a little bit past halfway here. It's a good time to pause and see any questions that we've got. I haven't seen any questions come in yet. If I've missed any, please let me know. But if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. And by the way, if you want everyone to see your question, which is helpful sometimes, you can switch from where it says to all panelists and attendees, or to all panelists, switch that to all panelists and attendees, and then everyone will be able to see your question. Let's see if we have any questions while we wait for questions to come in. Courtney, is there anything you want to add or clarify based on what I've said so far? Did I say Ann? I meant to say Courtney if I did.
No, you said Courtney, but no, I don't have anything to add.
Got it. Anna in the scenario threw me off. Okay, let's give one last call for, not last call for questions, we'll have other opportunities for questions as the webinar goes on, but let's give one last call for questions right now. All right, we'll move on then to performance measurement. We'll break that down into two different questions. What do you need to measure and how do you measure it? I really like this graphic because what we're really talking about, right, is measuring some sometimes squishy stuff, right? We're trying to measure the love. We're trying to measure those wonderful relationships that we saw in that video at the beginning. It's important for us to do this, right? Because we need to make sure we're having the impact we think we're having. We need to look for ways to improve, and we need to demonstrate our impact to our stakeholders. As I already mentioned, this is a federal program, right? Which means that these funds are supported by all of us, by all of you, by me, through our taxpayer dollars. And as a result of that, we've got a responsibility to be able to demonstrate the impact that we're having and to be able to communicate that to the administration, to folks in Congress, and to the public in general. So how do we do that in the Senior Companion? Let's start with talking about what you need to measure. You're going to see this in a document called the Notice of Funding Opportunity, our equivalent of a request for applications or a request for proposals. And I'm curious if anyone in the chat can tell me where you will find that document, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. If anyone in the chat can tell me where you can find that document, I'm curious if anyone can tell me that. the request, or it's called the Notice of Funding Opportunity, and it is our equivalent of a request for applications or request for proposals. Can anybody in the chat tell me where you might find that document? I'll give you a hint. Courtney and I have said it many times today. You don't need the whole URL. You can just kind of gloss it, title it. We'll see if an answer comes in there. I'm not going to give away the answer quite yet, and I will if I need to. But that's where you will find the Notice of Funding, which is a very, very important document that contains this text, which is the answer to what you need to measure, what you need to measure. It says for every $6,000 in annual base federal funding, at least one volunteer service year worth of service must be placed in work plans that result in national performance measure outcomes in the Healthy Futures focus area. There's a lot of words in there, right? For every $6,000 in annual base federal funding, at least one volunteer service year worth of service must be placed in work plans that result in national performance measure outcomes in the Healthy Futures focus area. Let's break that apart a little bit. And we'll start by talking about what a volunteer service year is. We already kind of alluded to talk about that. A volunteer service year is very simple. We often abbreviate it to VSY, and it's just a unit of hours. So the analogy I like to use is there are 16 ounces in a pound. There are 1,044 stipended hours in a volunteer service year. It's just a collection of hours, a collection of stipended hours that volunteers serve. Where that number comes from is it's an estimate of if they serve 20 hours per week for an entire year, 52.2. That math, you get 1,044 hours. That's all a VSY is. That's all a volunteer service year is. It's 1,044 stipended hours. So if that's just a unit of measure, we should be able to identify what 10 VSYs is. Can anyone do the math to tell me how many hours, how many stipended hours is 10 VSYs? All right, great. I see some answers. Carmela said that just to us. Looks like Kelly sent it to the whole audience. 10,440 hours, right? In this case, because it's a 10, the math is pretty simple. Before I move on, by the way, this text up here comes from the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which you can find on that's the website that Courtney and I have both talked about where Appendix A is. We'll visit that a little bit later. It is a very, very important resource. So that's what a VSY is. Screenshot of Appendix A, right? This is the same kind of Appendix A that we looked at before. And so when you see these volunteer service years in the middle, right, that's what this is. So can anyone tell me how many hours worth of service, how many stipended hours worth of service are associated with this first opportunity in Alaska? How many hours worth of service are associated with this? Can anybody do that math for me? A little bit trickier than just 10 VSYs, I admit, but if anybody's got a calculator handy, shouldn't be too difficult. Okay, I see one answer. Has anyone else got a calculator handy? All right, and I see another answer coming in. Right, it's about 55,000. It's about 55,000. So that's all that this is saying. And what this means in the context of Appendix A is this is the minimum amount of service that these grants need to have, the minimum amount of stipended service that these grants need to have. The funding is a maximum, so that's the maximum amount of funding available, and this is the minimum amount of service that needs to happen as a result of that funding. But for the context of performance measurement, it's actually got a different meaning. It's a minimum, which means that you could do more, right? So this, an applicant could apply for, as an example, 55 volunteer service years worth of service. But if we go back to that text from the Notice of Funding Opportunity, for every $6,000 in annual base federal funding, at least one volunteer service year worth of service must be placed in work plans that result in national performance measure outcomes in the Healthy Futures focus area. To get that number, you divide the total federal funding amount by 6,000. Can anyone, it looks like Kelly and Carmela have their calculators handy, this amount, 320,000 by 6,000. Can anyone divide 320,000 by 6,000? Okay, I see Carmela and Kelly. I think you might have to. To move that decimal point over, because the answer is 53. And in fact, if you go down the line, this number is always this number divided by 6,000 and then rounded to the nearest whole number. Right? That's where these numbers come from. So what you need to measure the performance for is the volunteer, is the amount. Sorry, let me rewind a little bit. So what you need to measure the performance of is the amount of service that's associated with this minimum amount of service. You can go above that, right? You can provide more service, but if so, by these same rules for performance measurement. You don't need to abide by these same rules, some more flexibility there. So that's what you need to measure, but how do you measure it? I'm going to go ahead and clear out my scribbles. You do that through a part of the application called the work plan. This framework will be very familiar to many of you, I think, because it's derived from a logical framework, right? So in a work plan, you're going to describe to us the community need, the kinds of activities that you're using to address that need, and then an output and an outcome. But here's where things are a little bit different for the Senior Companion Program. You guys will be choosing from a limited menu of outputs and outcomes, and in fact, essentially, just a couple of choices. Number of individuals served as an output, and then in the outcomes, number of individuals who report having increased capacity for independent living, or number of caregivers of older adults and individuals with disabilities who reported having increased social support. If you look at another document on that competition homepage, you'll see that there's some more information about how you can measure these things, including an actual survey, an instrument that you'll be using. So you're going to draw from this narrow choice. You can choose either H9A or H14, or you can actually use both. But you will be using one of these two outcome measures for that share of your service activity. If you have more of this, you actually don't need, you'll see there are some other options there, but you also don't need to measure the impact of their service at all through something that we call other community priorities. Now that's a lot of information, so we're going to wind up with, or we're going to close with a video here, and I do know I've got some questions, but I want to actually go to our competition homepage to show you some of these tools before we get to the field. Okay, I am here on the competition homepage, this resource that Courtney and I have been talking about at some length, and we're interested in the Senior Companion tool. So the Notice of Funding Opportunity, that's the most important document, I think it's fair to say, right? It is the equivalent of a request for applications or request for proposals. It gives you all the information you need to know to apply. What we were just talking about is Appendix B. That's where you're going to see the performance measure instructions. And it explains everything I just said about performance measurement. So you can go ahead and click here, pull it up. Actually, hang on while I try to pull it up. It looks like I ran into a little glitch. Let's see if I can get this sorted. Hang on, I'm going to switch something up that I think will address that glitch. There we go. Perform will take a look at it. This has all the information I just shared about performance measurement in more depth. And as I go down into the program, or into the document, what I particularly want to emphasize is just how there's some more information about how to actually measure these things here. So that's what you'll be using to measure in a portion of the application called the work plan. My number one recommendation about work plans is use this tool called the SCP Work Plan Development Worksheets. They're Microsoft Word documents, but they should be able to be opened in any word processing program. And they let you plan out your service and plan out your work plans without actually having to go into our electronic grants management system. Tomorrow's webinar will be all about that electronic grants management system, but it can be kind of clunky to experiment with. It can be kind of clunky to revise, to change things. So I work plan development Okay. I see we've got some questions here. I'm going to answer actually the bottom one first before I show a video. And while I show that video, feel free to load up some other questions for us. P. Takamine asks, can you please chat the website you were on? And I am happy to do that. We've actually done that a few different times today, but here it is again. And actually, there's a shorter URL that I'll be able to share too in just a second in case you want to just keep this handy. It is the competition headquarters petition homepage. It is where the resource that Courtney and I quite a bit throughout this webinar. But let's go and get some warm and fuzzies and kind of see this program in action again before we draw back and focus on some of these nitty-gritty details. I don't like to lose focus totally on the impact that this program has and the impact it can have, because we think it's a pretty great program. We're going to leave you guys excited about the video, and then we'll take the questions that we have.
Julio is a man that's been independent most of his life. When you get to a certain age, you need help from somebody, and that's where a senior companion comes in to help out. I've been with Julio for 4 years. I guess he got used to me in a lot of ways. You know, he depends on me a lot. My dad and my mom always taught us to help somebody else, somebody that needed help. One day he broke a finger. And I told him, I said, Julio, you have to go to emergency. I said, don't worry, I'm going with you. I knew he needed help. I knew he didn't want to be alone. But I was there with him. And I made him happy because of that. It goes both ways. It helps him, it helps me.
I got sick one Saturday, and I didn't want to alarm my family, so I called her, and she came over. She called 911. I stayed in the hospital 3 days, and when I came home, every morning, she wants to know, could you do anything? So when she found out what I was doing with the beads, she offered to come stay with me a few hours at nighttime, and I showed her how to make the beads, and she's been a great help.
I do things for her that she's not able to do. You know, like combing her hair and like getting her clothes upstairs to wash them in the washing machine, those kind of things. And that's what I help her out in doing. We're very close.
Euphemia seems like a daughter to me, really.
I take her to the drugstore, and I do some cooking if I don't hear from her, you know, looking at her. So her daughter seems to be very thankful for that.
My daughter feels very good about it, knowing that she has somebody that would contact her or somebody I can contact in the event that I'm sick.
There's a lot of people that do need some help. You know, instead of just sitting there, come out and get involved.
When I first started working with Maria Luisa, she was a different person altogether. Now she is very, very good at carrying on a conversation with me. Now she sings, she dances.
When Amelia came to us last year, we suspected that she'd be a good fit for Maria Luisa and her family. And this is a letter of appreciation that Maria Luisa's daughter has written. Mrs. Baldini is very caring. Her love, professionalism, and responsibility have changed the critical situation we had at our house due to my mother. I really can say that it has been a miracle.
As soon as I get there, she's waiting there for me. And we go into her room and we do some exercises or things with her that she wants to do. Then we'll go to the bakery. They treat her wonderful there. I feel like I've grown a lot. And I think that she has grown a lot with me because she does so many things and I'm so, so proud of her.
Senior Companions are the greatest group of volunteers. Without us, seniors who are frail and need help could not continue to live in their homes. Families get respite, and volunteers prove their value to the community. This is an innovative, cost-effective program that has real impact.
Okay, again, I like to do that near the end of the webinar so we don't lose the incredible potential for impact on older Americans and the volunteers and those other older Americans who are engaged in this program. But we do have some questions here. I'll just go through them in the order I see them. Please let me know if I miss one. The first one comes from Mary. Do volunteers have to serve 20 hours per week, or can he or she serve 10 hours per week? Great question, Mary. Senior companion volunteers can actually serve anywhere between 5 and 40 hours per week, or you can actually even use an annual measure, and the equivalent is 260 to 2,080 hours annually. So there's really about flexibility within those frameworks. That 20 hours per week that's really just meant to be a way to measure activity. It's just an estimate and is not at all meant to be what's required. While I continue to ask questions here, I'm actually just going to go to our resource page because I find that that's helpful here. Okay, Scott asks us, can you remind us what the overall indirect cost for grantees for administering the program is? So that's a question just to us, so I'll read it again. Can you remind us what the overall indirect cost for grantees for administering the SCP program? And Scott, there's actually not just one answer to your question. Those of you who've worked with federal with something called the Uniform Guidance, it is a portion that spells out how all grant funds are used, all federal grant funds. And in there, you'll find some information about the indirect cost rate. Specifically, what it says is that an organization can use what's called a de minimis rate of 10%, or it can negotiate a rate with the federal government. Some of you that come from large organizations that have worked extensively with the federal government may actually have already negotiated a rate you need. Alba asks, the amount of the funding available, will that be divided between all grantees? Alba, generally speaking, Senior Corps will fund one organization will provide one grant for each service area. So that amount of money is generally going to go to one organization. Those are all the questions I have seen, but please let me know if I've missed anything, and I should also check in with Courtney. Courtney, anything to add or clarify based on anything I've said so far?
Nope, I think you got it.
Okay, we do still have a few more minutes, so please feel free to ask any additional questions. While we wait to see any questions come in, we've got our final 2 questions. Just a very quick 2-question satisfaction survey. Helps us make sure that we're giving you the information you need and continue to improve. If you have a minute, please do let us know how we did using the short survey right now. I'm going to do another call for questions. Courtney, any closing thoughts?
Nope, just want to remind everyone that the competition is open now, and you can submit an application up until the deadline of 5 p.m. on December 6th.
Thank you, Courtney. I'm going to take that opportunity to remind everyone to not wait until 5 p.m. on December 6th to do it. Courtney is right, that is the deadline, but my advice to all of you, please don't wait for the deadline. Please, please, please don't wait until 4:59 p.m. Eastern Time on December 6th. Trust me, it is in your benefit to get there early. So that is my closing word to all of you, except also to say, of course, we think this is a pretty great program. I hope that came through. We're really proud of it. Thank you to all of you grantees who I know are here today who've helped make it that way. And I really hope that we see some exciting applications here to help expand this opportunity to more seniors and more communities across the country. I have not seen any other questions come in. So with that, we will go ahead and give you all back, looks like 4 minutes to go ahead and get those applications in early. Thanks again, everybody, for your interest. We'll be back here tomorrow to talk about our electronic grants management system. We really appreciate you coming and learning alongside us, and we look forward to seeing your applications.